Hey there everyone, and welcome to my final PC testing video for the GPD Win Max. I wasn't originally going to make a third video, but since I got a bunch of requests from you guys, I figured, hey, why not? This video is going to showcase 11 additional PC games testing on the GPD Win Max, which is a collection of a bunch of requests that you guys made, as well as some games that I handpicked from stuff that wasn't really that optimized for the Switch, like Bloodstained and The Outer Worlds. So let's dive right in and get to a game that might not be as optimized for PC either. When I played through Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, or at least what the game would let me play through, I was getting beautiful amounts of frame rates from 30 all the way up to 60 on various settings. The only problem is the game crashes constantly when you're going through certain animations, especially the shard animations. This is a particularly bad thing to crash the game because you're constantly getting new shards and abilities from the different enemies and bosses throughout the game. No matter how much I tweaked from the resolution, full screen, windowed mode, texture quality, it always ended up crashing at the same places, and I only managed to get out of the initial room once or twice. Then we get into our first request, which was the Dragon Age franchise. To do this, I decided to go with the most recent game, Dragon Age Inquisition, which runs really nicely. I kept it on medium settings, and I got a nice and solid 60 frames per second when I was roaming around dungeons not around enemies, and it jumped around in the 30 to 50s range when I was in combat. Then we get to Kholat, a horror game based on the Dyatlov Pass incident. If you recall from my Switch review, it had a lot of issues with blurring that made reading the notes particularly difficult. On PC, I had to put the initial city area on low settings, getting it to about 25 to 30 FPS. But once you get to the mountain in the game's main open area, I was able to put it up to medium settings and keep it above the 30s to 40s range. The only thing I really had to do outside of that was turn anti-aliasing off, which made the journal and notes very easy to read even without zooming in. And next we get to another request, which was the Madden NFL franchise. Thankfully, the person who requested this had amazing timing because last weekend Madden 21, the newest game of the series, was free to play. I did have to put Madden on its lowest settings possible, but when I went into an exhibition match, it managed to stay at a solid 30 to 40 frames per second both during gameplay and during the cinematic replays. Now we've got possibly the most important test here for handheld players, The Outer Worlds. This was a game that played okay on the Switch, but at the cost of severe graphical downgrades. I did have to tweak the settings a bit, putting it on low settings and dropping the 3D resolution to about 85 to 90, but I managed to get full screen combat to the high 20s and low 30s range, and the lowest frame rate I ended up getting was about 25 to 27, specifically during the cinematic conversations with NPCs. While it definitely isn't perfect, it doesn't drop as low as the Switch version does, and it looks worlds and worlds better. Then we get to Planetside 2, another request. I had to put this down around medium and low settings, but whenever I was in a match with just a few players around, I managed to keep it above 40 frames per second, and when it got a little crowded, it dropped to about 30 to 40 frames per second. And now we get to the tests I had the most fun with. I have gone through the entirety of the Resident Evil 2 remake on the GPD Win Max since getting the unit, and in that time I've learned a lot about its settings. Still keeping the resolution pretty high but putting it in windowed mode, I managed to keep pretty much the entire game at least 25 to 35 frames per second throughout. Though if you really want good performance, you can drop the resolution down and make it a little grainy at the 1024 by 768 range, and the game will drop down to about 30 every so often, but for a lot of the game it's gonna stay around 40 to 60. Though there is one major hindrance. The assets of the RE engine, at least with this game, do not play well with the Intel graphics. Several areas of the game have assets that will literally constantly flash as if they were rendering, unrendering, and rendering again. It doesn't really affect the performance of the game, but there are two key areas, one being in the sewers when you're going for the King and Queen plugs, and the main hall of the police station, that are particularly bad about it. Next we dive into the Resident Evil 3 remake, or at least its demo. Thankfully, the flashing assets problem do not happen in any area of the demo that I saw, but we still have to lower that graphical quality, and when we get to those lower resolutions like we showed in RE2, we can get the game running a good 30 to 40 frames per second. Going off of Kholat and its comparison between the Switch and PC, I decided to also go into another horror game, Remothered Tormented Fathers. This was a game that ran pretty well on the Switch, at least after it got its performance update, but suffered a lot of visual problems with lower resolution and a lot of blurring. I put Remothered on medium settings and lowered the resolution to a widescreen format, eventually getting me to about 30 to 40 frames per second during gameplay. It definitely still doesn't look perfect, but the frame rate is nice and smooth. When diving into platformers, we jump into the Spyro Reignited Remake Trilogy, and we have the same situation as we had with Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. It looks beautiful and runs at a nice and smooth 50 to 60 frames per second even on low and medium settings, but it crashes constantly. I was fighting it constantly this morning with changing settings, windowed in full screen, setting launch options, rebooting the computer. It definitely looks and feels absolutely beautiful, at least if it lets you play it long enough to actually enjoy it. But let's end this video on a pretty high note with World of Warcraft, a heavily requested game from all of you. I used the new version of World of Warcraft, not WoW Classic, and I did some of the early quests for the Blood Elf class. Granted, I didn't really get that far in the game, but keeping it on medium settings with a lot of enemies and other players running around, I managed to keep it around 40 frames per second. And that is a wrap, everyone. Across these 4 videos I've done on the GPD Win Max, I have shown you performance from around 40 different PC games. All of you are absolutely welcome to request more performance information, but I'm not going to do any more of these compilation videos. The most I'll probably do is give you information in the form of a comment and possibly an unlisted video showing that game's performance. Not that I don't enjoy doing these GPD Win videos, because I absolutely do, but I want to get back to focusing on Switch reviews now that I've done my review of this unit. I hope you enjoyed this last PC testing video, and as always, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thanks for watching and have a great day.